Rambos, Godzilla, and Batman, oh my! Hey folks, I'm Joe, and this is Same Name, Different Game. This time out, we're talking about several iterations on the exact same game for the same system. It's a little weird, and it's something I've never really done before. And while yes, towards the end I will eventually be talking about a literal different game with the same name, that's not really what this episode is about. I'm looking at 6 different iterations of the same game on the same hardware with incremental differences and basically no substantial gameplay differences between any of them. And it's an entry in a well-known and well-loved series by Sega, and this particular entry is one that I probably should have gotten to a lot sooner. But thanks to Patreon supporter Frank, we're getting to it now. So let's dive in with a little history on the revenge of Shinobi. I've talked about the Genesis at length in many videos, but one thing I don't think I've ever really gone in depth about is the post-Genesis launch, pre-Super NES timeframe. The Genesis does what Nintendo don't timeframe. Nowadays, a similar situation feels impossible, unless one platform maker fumbled a system so badly out of the gate that they ended up releasing another entirely new system in the middle of a generation, nearly 4 years before their competitors, but I can't think of who would do such a thing. Anyways, there was a 2-year period during which Sega's Mega Drive, aka the Genesis, was the most advanced game system on the market, the only true 16-bit game console. And while the PC Engine, the system we in the West would come to know as the TurboGrafx, presented more than a challenge to Sega's Mega Drive in Japan, NEC opted to mail in that system in the rest of the world, if they even bothered to release it at all. So Sega essentially had the run of the new generation in most of the world from 1989 until 1991. A lot of the early games for it were arcade ports. The system launched with 6 games. Half of them, including the pack-in Altered Beast, were Sega arcade games. But they also wanted to make original games. It's one thing to bring games from the arcade, but at that time, it was already important to have games exclusive to your console. And one of the earliest on the Genesis was the Super Shinobi, aka The Revenge of Shinobi, a direct sequel to Sega's arcade hit, Shinobi. And while the game would get a separate arcade sequel around the same time in the guise of Shadow Dancer, which itself would get a version on the Genesis later, this is a completely unique game made with a home console sensibility. According to a 2003 interview with director Noriyoshi Oba, translated by shmuplations.com, he and the team wanted to do something different than what you'd see in the arcade, unique to the home market. He said,
"On the technical side, since this was going to be on the new Mega Drive hardware, we wanted to use as much parallax scrolling as we could. We wanted every stage, if possible, to have over 3 layers of background scrolling. Our idea was to come up with a style of gameplay that actually made use of those multiple backgrounds. But we didn't want to simply port the arcade version of Shinobi, we wanted to do something completely different. The reason why is that console games have their own playstyle, distinct from arcade games. Arcade games were built around the concept that if you pay 100 yen, you get to play for about 3 minutes. And that was reflected in the way those games played too. On the other hand, for a console game you'd pay something like $60, so you needed a gameplay system that would make players feel like they've got their money's worth.
And frankly, they did it, pushing the Genesis hardware as far as they could reasonably be expected to within a year of launch. Revenge of Shinobi hit the US and Japan in December of 1989 and PAL territories around the world in late 1990. And to see this game in action at the time? Compared to what the NES had out there, this one definitely made you a believer in Genesis does what Nintendo don't. The press of the time was quite taken with it. Huge detailed sprites, parallax scrolling, and many people's introduction to the one and only Yuzo Koshiro, who did a fantastic soundtrack for this one, his first on the Genesis. But what about the gameplay? Was there a stake here, or just sizzle? Altered Beast famously shows the graphical power of the system, but it's a slog to play. Well, I think it's probably obvious, but yes, the gameplay is there in Revenge of Shinobi, and again, the press of the time absolutely recognized it, as did consumers. In fact, part of why I'm doing this episode is that Sega kept this game in print for basically the entire life of the Genesis. But more on that later. Let's talk about the game itself before we get to revisions. Revenge of Shinobi is, as I said earlier, a direct sequel to the arcade Shinobi. After we see this extremely impressive title sequence, which, hey, that's really obviously actor Sonny Chiba as Joe Musashi here on the title screen, we get a brief story scroll. Zeed, the criminal syndicate defeated by the Shinobi Joe Musashi at the end of the original game, is back as Neo Zeed. They've killed Joe's clan and abducted his fiancée, which means, well, yeah, it's time for a shinobi to get some revenge. To get that revenge, you'll travel from Japan to the US and off the East Coast to Neo Zeed's island headquarters. And to get there, you'll need all your ninja skills and tools. First, your shurikens, which I think actually look more like kunai, but the game calls them shurikens, so I will too. You start with a limited number of these, the default is 50, but along your journey you'll find more. An icon with 1 is worth 5, an icon with 2 is worth 20, so keep an eye out. As long as you make an effort to collect them, you won't run out often. But if you do, you have a knife for close combat, as well as your feet, both of which you can use even when you have shurikens. Just get close to your enemy and dispatch them with a melee attack. This game does away with the save the hostages mechanic of the original game, but you can still power up your attacks. Some crates contain POW icons, which give you flaming shurikens and a sword for close encounters. But perhaps the most valuable perk to the POW icon is that Joe will now cross his blades in front of him while walking, deflecting enemy projectiles. But tools are not enough. Skill is also needed for a ninja, and Joe's got plenty of that too. First and foremost, he can now double jump, and attacking when double jumping allows him to throw 8 shurikens at once, raining blades on his foes. But keep your shuriken total in mind when doing this, because spamming it will chew through your supply fast. Finally, as in the previous game, Joe has ninja magic, 4 spells, and while you start each stage with 1 use of ninja magic, you can find more. First is the Jitsu of Ikazuchi, which surrounds Joe in lightning, making him invincible until he takes a certain amount of damage. Second is the Jitsu of Karyu, which summons several fire dragons from the bottom of the screen, damaging all enemies. Then, the Jitsu of Fushin, granting Joe the ability to jump higher, very helpful for some of the tricky platforming sections towards the end of the game. And finally, the Jitsu of Megin, which sees Joe sacrifice himself to deal a huge amount of damage to all on-screen foes. According to that 2003 interview with Oba, This was also intended as a way for players to not have to be sent back on losing a life. If your health bar is low, use it, and you get a full health bar and one more use of ninja magic. Using these tools and techniques, you'll battle across 8 rounds with 3 stages each, 2 scrolling areas, and a boss fight. In the first area, you'll face ninjas in your village, having been destroyed and taken over by Neo Zed, before facing a living set of samurai armor. Then you'll head through a canyon in a pretty tough level for so early in the game. This stage feels meant to teach you how to use the double jump effectively, as here you'll need it to reach higher platforms and fight off winged ninjas. Stage 2-2 is supposed to be Tokyo, where you'll face more ninjas, kung fu fighters, and nuns who become fighting ninja girls? Yeah, so that interview I keep mentioning with Oba, they asked him about the nuns, and he said,
"Well, that was just my personal fancy."
You know what, Oba, man? Own that. I ain't here to king shame. That round ends fighting a boss ninja in a disco, and once he's dispatched, it's on to a military base controlled by Neo Zed on the east coast of Japan. Here you'll find soldiers and Rambo with a flamethrower? I mean, come on, just look. The second section here is an airplane traveling to the US, with doors that randomly open and will suck you out, killing Joe instantly. The boss here is brain in a jar. Yeah, okay, sure, why not? Round 4 is called Detroit in the manual, but on this map, that's not Detroit. At any rate, you begin in a junkyard with more Rambos and soldiers before entering a factory that has a few instant death traps around. The boss here is... okay, that's the Terminator. I mean, that looks like Arnold, which means this game has Sly and Schwarzenegger, and when he's defeated, his skin comes off, and... yeah, Terminator. Some people also claim he's the Hulk, because he turns green as he takes damage, but... nah, I don't see it. Any green dude isn't automatically the Hulk. Round 5 is Area Code 818, aka Los Angeles. You climb a building before walking down a freeway with more sexy nuns and some really annoying red cars that will run you over and do a lot of damage. The boss of this round is a big military truck with 3 sensors you have to destroy. Round 6 is Chinatown, which looks to be in Chicago on the map, and Chicago does have a large Chinatown neighborhood. Here, you'll first take on more kung fu fighters, as well as enemies using nunchucks and women who want to dance fight with you. 6-2 is a ride on Chicago's L, and when I say on the L, I mean on it, not in it. Avoid beams in the tunnel before making it outside and fighting more ninjas. At the end of the train ride, you'll face the boss of Chinatown, Spider-Man. Sorry, what? Yeah, that's pretty indisputably Spider-Man. Okay, but after he takes a certain amount of damage, he's Batman now? Okay, yeah, sure, if you say so, game. Stage 7 takes us to the Big Apple, where we first fight on the docks. More Rambos, more ninjas, some really frustrating jumps, and a few cheap deaths, because like Simon Belmont, Joe Musashi gets knocked back when taking damage, so it's very easy to be bumped into pits. After that, it's Neo Zed's weapons factory, filled with soldiers and machinery that can do hefty damage. The 7th boss is... oh, come on! Godzilla? Just so we're all on the same page here, Neo Zed, in order to kill one single ninja, is using the combined might of Rambo, the Terminator, Batman, Spider-Man, and Godzilla. Well, if nothing else, it just goes to show how rad Joe Musashi is. So once you've pummeled that nuclear lizard, they say he's got to go Godzilla, it's on to the final stage. Neo Zed's island base in the Atlantic. After fighting your way in, past the legion of enemies, you're presented with a maze. You can trial and error this one, but honestly, if you don't figure it out after a while, just use a guide, because it gets really frustrating. And once you clear the maze, you fight the head of Neo Zeed, who the manual only refers to as the boss. Behind you, your fiancée Naoko is slowly being crushed by the ceiling. And there are two endings, depending on if she survives. And that is Revenge of Shinobi. It is a fantastic game. I really enjoy it, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the couple of things about it that I don't love. First, the double jump is just too finicky. The timing is really specific, and I can go long stretches without screwing it up. But then I'll miss time one at a really terrible time, and it will cause me to lose a life, or worse, my last life. Speaking of, you only get 3 continues here, and then it's back to the start, which I honestly find infuriating. I get that the game isn't that long, but give me a break. Also, sometimes being in line vertically with a crate can make you do a melee attack instead of throwing a shuriken, which can be bad. I'm trying to deal with that enemy, I'm not even close to the crate, throw a shuriken. And speaking of crates, the bombs and crates thing just doesn't feel like it organically creates challenge. It's, hey, a power-up, oh just kidding, a bomb. They almost never do damage to me, but still, like the double jump, once in a while they cause a big problem. And on the damage front, you slowly gain higher maximum health as you progress through the game. But if you continue, your life bar resets, which can be a bit frustrating. Finally, the final boss is ridiculous, unless you know exactly how to deal with him, in which case he's a pushover. And that's a bit annoying. There's no middle ground here of a good challenge. It's either he's nearly impossible, or double up on the invincibility magic and he's a chump. All that said, I do still really enjoy this game, and recommend it to any fan of classic side-scrolling action, especially since there are ways to mitigate the difficulty. First, you can add infinite shurikens using this code.
Our first tip is from Game Players Magazine. Next up, Revenge of Shinobi for Genesis. Here's the way to get yourself an unlimited supply of shuriken. Select shuriken, now press A, B, and the C buttons as fast as you can. Faster, faster, keep punching the buttons until the infinity symbol appears under your number of shuriken. All the shuriken a player could want. The trick is fast fingers.
No, actually, sorry, that's wrong. Well, not entirely wrong, but GamePro and our buddy Johnny Arcade there added an unnecessary step. You don't have to mash the buttons. Just leave shuriken set to 0 and stay on the options screen for 30 seconds. It'll switch to an infinity sign. The other thing is that changing the difficulty mostly just affects how many lives you have, so turn it to easy for 10 lives per credit, which really helps with that whole 3 continues thing. And we'll run down the numerous revisions to Revenge of Shinobi after these messages.
Okay, the game is Shinobi, your basic fist and stomach, foot and face arcade hit. 19 stages of major ninja warfare. Observe, you got your throwing stars, your bombs, your nunchucks. Nice shot. If you live through this round, you get ninja magic. Hey, you could be next. Guys, get off me.
Shinobi, just one of 70 games from Sega, and coming this Christmas, 2-player Double Dragon. Sega, major fun and games.
Where do they see Double Dragon?
Master System and games sold separately.
セガシノビ大都会にスーパーヒーローが現れたその名は武蔵息もつかせぬ連続アクション立ちはだかる者はキル忍者ゲームシノビ Sega
Genesis brings you the dazzling powers of the mystic warriors, the ninja, in Revenge of Shinobi. And 16-bit arcade racing action with Super Monaco Grand Prix. 16-bit arcade combat, skills, strategy, reflex, and rivalry. Experience the ninja magic of Revenge of Shinobi and the exhilarating rush of Super Monaco Grand Prix for the Genesis system. Sega Genesis brings the arcade experience home. Genesis system and game sold.
So, that game I just talked about, that's the first edition of Revenge of Shinobi, and there's some difference of opinion about whether or not it ever came out in North America at all. Sega Retro says it did not, and I trust their research, but they also say that both the Japanese and US versions came out in the same month, and that seems weird. Well, compounding things is the fact that the title screen in this game is determined based on the region of the system you're playing the cartridge in. And since I played all of these on a US Genesis, they all say Revenge of Shinobi. But whether or not that first edition came out in the US, I can say for sure that the one I'm about to talk about did, and this first revision changes a lot. The initial revision definitely sees the most changes. Here, Rambo is removed. We now have a bald guy with a flamethrower in his place. Spider-Man's outfit has been changed to the traditional blue and red instead of black and red, and he no longer turns into Batman. I mean, he no longer shapeshifts at all, he leaves. But also, the Batman boss is no longer Batman, he is a wrongly colored Devil Man now? Some people talk about him being Batman villain Man-Bat, but he looks a lot more like Go Nagai's Devilman to me. His accompanying bats are also slightly redesigned. Revision 2 actually changes almost nothing. The Spider-Man copyright is actually acknowledged here, as Sega had a license for their Spider-Man game on Genesis, though oddly they also had a Rambo license for their Rambo 3 Genesis game, and they didn't bother with that one. This revision also moves Yuzo Koshiro's music copyright to that screen instead of at the bottom of the title screen. Now, while no in-game graphics are changed here, this version does have the only gameplay change, which of course sticks around for subsequent revisions. Spider-Man's webs now not only hurt you, but they also slow you down until they disappear. Revision 3 is definitely the most common one out there. It was issued as a Sega Classic in print through at least 1995, but also in several compilations. The one I have an actual copy of is this version, part of the Genesis 6-pack, a fantastic value which includes this, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Hang-On, and Columns. Well, they can't all be zingers. It's also on the Sega CD Sega Arcade Classics compilation, which was packed in with certain Sega CD systems. This one is identical to the prior revision, with one exception. Godzilla is now a skeleton. With organs. It's kind of rad, actually. But also weird, because without the backplates, he didn't really look that much like Godzilla to begin with. Like, he's just a big fire-breathing lizard. Speaking of fire-breathing, his fire is blue now in the skeleton version as well. This version also appeared on another compilation. Yeah, I have to mention it specifically and show it, because it's the Sega Smash Pack Volume 1 on the Dreamcast, a collection of emulated Genesis games, plus arcade games Virtua Cop 2 and Wrestle War, plus original puzzler Sega Swirl. All of the Genesis games on this disc have absolutely rancid sound emulation. Just listen to this disaster. How could anyone do that to Yuzo Koshiro's score and live with themselves? I mean, come on! Oh, and in only this version there seems to be a sound when you take damage using the lightning ninja magic. I actually think there's always a faint sound, but the awful sound in this emulator brings it to the forefront. And speaking of Sega Smash Packs, there was a previous Sega Smash Pack released in 1998 on Windows PCs. Now, given everything that I just told you, you're probably assuming that it would be the third revision included in that compilation. But it wasn't. Somehow, a prototype ROM was released in this retail product. It's bizarre, but since this collection just ran ROMs in a commercial version of the K-Gen emulator, you can put it on a flash cart and play it on real hardware, like I'm doing here. Visually, this is in line with the original release, Rambo, Batman, etc. It has a stage select on the start screen and a no death option in the options menu, alongside shurikens being spelled slightly differently. The thunder sound on the title screen is different, and some of the music is missing or moved around in the game. None of the hidden items are here that I could find, so if something isn't in a crate, you're not going to find it, and some of the crate items are moved around. Some enemy placement is slightly different, while some foes and bosses just aren't here at all. The Rambos seem to pop in at semi-random. The sexy nuns are missing, the stage 3 brain in a jar boss is kinda there, but you don't have to fight it. Godzilla is there, but just dies automatically, which is for the best, because here you can't pass through the platform in front of him, and I cannot imagine how frustrating that would be to deal with. The stage 8-2 labyrinth is totally devoid of enemies and items. There is no final boss, ending, or credits. Finishing 8-2 takes you to the final boss room for a second, then restarts the game at round 1. Finally, some of the Jitsu animations are different from their final versions. So that's weird. And weirdest of all, I can't find the story on how this happened. How did a prototype game get a commercial release a decade after it was made? I have to assume it was an accident, but I feel like at least 2 people had to make a mistake on this one. Someone at Sega of Japan had to send it to someone at Sega of America who published it, and then no one noticed that this is clearly not the correct current version of this game? Like, the Stage 3 boss is legitimately broken. Did no one play it before release? Did no one play it through the 3rd stage? It's baffling, honestly. And then, after those Sega Smash Packs, Revenge of Shinobi just kinda disappeared from Sega's countless reissues. Genesis collections on PS2, PSP, PS3, Xbox 360, all conspicuously missing the Revenge of Shinobi. Until it appeared on the Wii Virtual Console in 2009, changed yet again. The copyright screen now just mentions Yuzo Koshiro, and Sonny Chiba is finally gone from the title screen, apparently replaced with someone from developer M2, who handled all of Sega's Virtual Console emulation. So, if the Marvel Spider-Man copyright is gone, wow, we've just got a dude in a fuchsia body stocking. That, my friends, is a choice. And aside from Pink Spider-Man and the changed title screen, it's the same as the previous revision. Anywhere you find Revenge of Shinobi now is going to be this version, whether it's on Switch or Steam or iOS or Android as part of that Sega Forever thing. It's this Revenge of Shinobi. Unless it's on the GBA. Do I have to talk about the 2002 GBA version? Okay, I'm gonna make this quick, because every awful thing you've heard about this game is 100% true. For reasons that I'll never understand, Sega seemed in a rush to devalue a handful of their classic properties on GBA around this time. An unholy trinity was unleashed on us. Sonic the Hedgehog, Altered Beast, and yes, Revenge of Shinobi. Revenge of Shinobi was developed by short-lived California developer 3D6 Games, also behind Altered Beast, and co-published by Sega and THQ. It never got a Japanese release. I don't know if 3D6 didn't get enough time, or enough money, or if their heart just wasn't in it. I don't like to speculate, but the game is bad. It's not unplayable, but it's slow, the enemies are boring, the level layouts are dull as dishwater, the ninja magic doesn't feel good to use, going downstairs is a chore. It's really, really boring. I don't know why you'd take the name of a classic Genesis game, a specific name of one specific entry in a well-known series, and make a game that is literally nothing like that game. It boggles the mind. So yeah, that sucked. But now let's do like we always do and take a look and a listen side by side. And we're going to do it a little differently this time. We're going to start by looking at the differences between all the Genesis revisions, then we'll compare the Genesis and the GBA. Let's do it. Okay, obviously the Genesis looks and sounds the best. The GBA uses that awful pre-rendered 3D object turned into a sprite look that I have never liked. No, not even in Donkey Kong Country. The GBA music isn't offensive, but it's kind of boring. And I still can't get over that Dreamcast sound. Yikes. And that makes it time to give the edge. And it's kind of moot, right? Like, I just told you very clearly how I feel about the GBA version, and when it comes to the Genesis version, if you're a physical cartridge collector, near as I can tell, it is impossible to figure out which version you have by just looking at the cartridge. So, yeah. Although, if you want the cheapest option, strangely enough, it's actually the 6-pack, which is about $12 to $15 in the current aftermarket, and if you are a Genesis owner and physical cartridge collector, this is legitimately the single best value on the system, and you should already own it. Or, you know, if you're not a physical cartridge collector, it's on Steam, it's on Switch, it's on PS4 and Xbox One, which is playable on PS5 and Xbox Series X. It's anywhere that you could want it. It's even on the Japanese Genesis Mini, but not the American or European one for some reason. But that does it. I hope you will come back next time, though, because it's finally starting to get warm out, and the summer around here, I don't know, it might surprise you. It might do more than surprise you. You might even find it to be 100 mega shocking. See you then. Hey everyone, Joe here, and thanks so much for watching me talk about Revenge of Shinobi. Shoutouts to G to the Next Level for his voice, and to Frank for the request. If you dug the show, do the normal stuff. Like, subscribe, hit the stupid bell icon, and comment below telling me your favorite Genesis action game. If you really dug it, consider supporting on Patreon or via YouTube membership. You'll get early access to new videos, the chance to vote in polls about upcoming episodes, your name here with these cool people, and more. You can also support the channel by using the links below for merch, one-time tips at Ko-Fi, Coffee, still not sure how to pronounce that, and doing some shopping at small businesses that I also like to shop at. If you want more Sega, the video on the left is on Streets of Rage 2, and the video on the right is on Virtua Fighter.